Hi, everyone. This is Nicole Serrato, and welcome to the Resume Building and Interview Tips and Internship virtual event with the Young Leaders Board and with CSF. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to be introducing the panelists who are on with us. But in a second, we first want to tell you what is the CSF Alumni Network and what is the CSF Young Leaders Board and the Principal Councils Network as well. So if you're in a CSF, if you received a CSF scholarship, which we provide scholarships for children K through 8th grade, after you graduate from 8th grade and you're no longer receiving the scholarship from us and you move on to high school, you are now considered a CSF alum. So I myself am a CSF alum. So I, received a scholarship when I was younger. And so now that network, we've come together and built a network of alumni who, some of them are already professionals and help other alumni who are graduating from 8th grade. And then some of us become Young Leaders Board members. And so I'll go into a brief explanation of what a Young Leaders Board member is and what a CSF Principal Council member is. So CSF Young Leaders is a group of individual professionals in New York City. And now with the pandemic, they're also located elsewhere, who've decided that education is very important to them. They believe that children should deserve to get a quality education, and they've joined forces with CSF and have donated their time and their resources to helping you, guide you in whatever guidance you might need, and helping providing more scholarships. So throughout the year, they, attend different events, volunteer events like this one. So if you have, I'm going to introduce the panelists in a second, and the President's Council is also that. And so they're also young professionals in New York City and in other places who have committed to helping you and guiding you in the next steps. So as I introduce our panelists, if, one of the panelists are in an industry that you want to pursue or an industry that you've been thinking about pursuing, take notes, write down your questions. We will be answering questions towards the end. We can always connect you with one of the panelists. They're more than happy to answer any questions, within their field or even just some guidance. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Katie. She is a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and she works at Morgan Stanley. Then we have Josh, and he works at Gold Point Partners, and his alma mater is the University of Michigan. We have Tamika, who is a graduate of Temple University, and she now works at New York City Cyber. And we have Shivani, who works at Nonprofit Finance and is a graduate of New York University. So again, if you have interest in any of these fields, and you want to connect with them directly, just let us know and we can make that happen. So we're going to go through each panelist and they're going to, give a brief introduction about their own experiences of resumes, working, interning, and we'll start with Josh. You're at the top of my screen.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm really happy to be here and happy to share all my or any of my experiences with you all. And to the extent any of you have questions, please feel free to reach out. But, I guess kind of starting in high school, I think one of the things that everyone feels when they start doing internships in high school is that you have to know what it is that you want to do for the rest of your life, or at least have an idea of what you want to do in college, and, for a career. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think, in high school, it's really just about getting any sort of, quote unquote, real world experience, and just kind of getting as many experiences as you can under your belt. And, even if that's working at a summer camp, it doesn't have to be a corporate job. Just establishing skills, whether that be organizational skills, management skills, working with kids, working with people above you, just putting a lot of skills under your belt. And then as you transition to college, really just being able to speak to those experiences and what kind of skill sets those experiences gave you, and really promoting yourself and just kind of, illustrating to people, whether it be, college interviews or college internships, really just being able to articulate the skill sets that, all of your past experiences have been able to give you, regardless of what they are. And just kind of trying to show as much confidence and poise and, clarity about what you're capable of doing as possible. And I would say that, even in college, I think, it is important to, you know, I guess begin thinking about what it is that you want to do for a career. But again, it doesn't by any means mean that that's what you have to do for the rest of your life. And I always tell people that trying things and knowing what you don't like is almost as important as learning what you do like, quite frankly, because it just kind of helps you hone in on what it is that you do like that much more. So really just getting experiences again, and just getting as many skill sets as you can. And this is not to sound rude or mean by any means, but having been in the corporate world for a long time and seeing new kids start out of college or even a couple years out of college, no one's really expecting you to know really anything, everything you learn is going to be on the job. And so, employers, especially out of college, are really just looking for kids who are driven, kids who are motivated, have good skill sets, show confidence. So really, like I said, I think especially at, high school and college, it's really about getting experiences, building skill sets, and being able to speak to those down the road.
Next, if Katie can go ahead and tell us what your experience has been in regards to resume building, interview tips, or any internship tips that you have for our audience.
I have a couple of each, and I'll kick it off with a personal story. So when I was a junior in college, I procrastinated big time on the application process for an internship, and basically looked around in May of my junior year and realized that everyone else had jobs and I somehow had completely missed the boat. So I subsequently spent the next month scrambling around trying to find an internship, and it was really stressful and I did not enjoy the process. So when I returned to school my senior year, I started looking for jobs almost immediately and was, able to really improve my skill set and my interview skills just by, being proactive about it and getting involved early. So I sort of broke up my pieces of advice into 3 sections. I'm now pretty integrally involved in recruiting for my department at Morgan Stanley. So wanted to share some of the tips and things that I hear regularly in feedback from my group. So, the first thing is really when you're building your resume. So the smallest things matter. It sounds really trivial, but pay attention to your formatting, pay attention to your spelling and your grammar. Try to keep your resume concise and to one page. Attention to detail in many jobs is really important. And a sloppy looking resume might get automatically passed over before people even have the chance to take a look at what your skill sets are. It might sound really redundant, it might sound really silly, but taking that extra 10 minutes just to make sure that it's polished, your grammar's all correct, your spelling's correct, you don't have dates in some places and no dates in other places, is just a really easy way to make sure that your resume gets read from top to bottom, which is honestly half the battle. The second piece of advice I wanted to talk about would be sort of to start early. The more you can talk to people, the more people that can see your resume, and honestly, the more you can get to practice your interview skills, the more comfortable you will be as you continue to navigate through this process. This applies whether you're in high school or whether you're in college, talking to different people, exactly like Josh said, figuring out what kind of jobs might interest you. It's a good way to learn and see, what might be a good, valuable use of your time. Depending on the job you like to, another lesson learned by me, recruiting can begin really, really early. I know at Morgan Stanley, we often recruit a year in advance for our summer programs. So just being cognizant of what you might be interested in and making sure to keep an eye on when application windows are, because you can't get a job if you've missed the application window. So just being cognizant of things like that and being proactive to, look into, sort of industries you might be interested in and when they do their biggest hiring pushes and things like that. And then finally, you know, the interview tips. Once you reach the interview stage, it can be really daunting. So my first piece of advice would be to practice. Look up common interview questions. You'd be shocked. People all ask the same thing. And think about answers that sort of highlight the skills that might be most applicable for the job you want. You can always tailor your resume as well, but coming prepared with the typical interview questions about how it applies to the specific job you're, you know, applying to will go a long way with your recruiter. Be sure to research the job, the role, and the company. Do a quick Google search. Have they been in the news lately? I can tell you, you know, when I'm doing interviews and someone says, oh, I saw, you know, Morgan Stanley just did XYZ, it shows that you care and that you really want to be at this company and you're not just checking a box and submitting your resume everywhere. And then finally, you know, Josh touched on this a lot and I completely agree. Be confident and don't be afraid to show your personality. You know, fit is just as important as your skill set. So even if you aren't sure that you're qualified for the job, many people give full-time job training, or to Josh's point, you'll learn everything you need to know on the job. And they're honestly looking for people who they think would be a good fit for their role. So showcasing your personality and understanding why you're excited about the job, driven and motivated, will go just as far as spending a lot of time, you know, nailing down perfect interview questions and trying to be someone that you're not.
Thank you so much, Katie. There was so much great information there. I hope you all took notes. Next, I'm going to have Shivani come on and talk to her about her experience.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shivani. I currently work at Nonprofit Finance Fund, and I graduated from NYU. And I wasn't born in New York, but I was raised here. And I'm not sure if the panelists or the people on this call are from New York, but I just wanted to share a little bit of tips that I learned when I was in high school and going through the New York high school system. So in New York City, you can start working when you are 14. You can get like a work card from your school. And since I come from like a low income background, I had to start working early. Some of you might be in the same position. So if you want to start working early and you're in high school, you can get like a work card from the city that will allow you to work a certain amount of hours per week at certain employers. So I would recommend looking into that. And also New York City offers a summer youth employment program. It was around when I was young, and I'm pretty sure it's still around. So you should look into that as well. It's basically a summer program. They give you a stipend and you get placed at different sites around the city. For instance, I was placed at LaGuardia Community College and I did like admin work when I was like 15. And it was just really great to build like project management skills and learning how to navigate the workspace and interact with people who are older than me and you know, that I'm working on projects with as well. When I entered college, you know, I started off thinking I wanted to go to med school. So my first 3 years of college, I was working in labs. I was trying to get like the volunteering experiences so that I could become a doctor. I was volunteering in hospitals, and you know, by the time my senior year rolled around, I realized I didn't want to become a doctor anymore. And I was like, oh no, like, you know, like now I've like spent most of my college career like in hospitals, but I had no real work experience. So much like Katie, I know all my friends had jobs my senior year, but I didn't, and I was struggling to find an internship. So my advice when you're in college is to take advantage of your college's career center. You know, they're really there for you, and I think they're really underutilized. There are career counselors that will set up a one-on-one meeting with you for 30 minutes to walk you through your resume, help you edit it. They will help connect you with people in their network as well. So take advantage of people around you. It really does take a village to end up where you want to be. So don't feel embarrassed to ask for help. Really reach out. People are there to help you. That's probably the number one advice that I would give to everyone who's in college right now. And then just different interview preps. When I was in college, after I realized I didn't want to go to medical school anymore, I started off doing like at a wealth management firm. I did an internship doing like portfolio management. And I realized that in that type of interview, they might ask you questions that are more specific to the industry. Like, why do you want to do finance? Like, you have to really know your goals. So I would say that if you know which industry you want to be in, make sure that you realize, or you at least, you know, look internally and ask yourself, why do I want to do this? Like, what is propelling me to go into a certain industry, because you will be asked, you know, like, what are your goals? Why do you want this position? So really just take some time to think and reflect about your passions, what values you have, what you're bringing to the table. And those are the things that really set you apart from other candidates who are trying to apply for the same positions that you are. And then also for interview prep, I think it's really valuable to prepare for the difficult questions. Like, you know, you're going to be asked like questions like, you know, what's your biggest failure? And when you're put on the spot, you don't know what your biggest failure is. So just anticipating what are those difficult questions that they might ask you and you might need to think about. Like, they'll ask you like, you know, what are your weaknesses? And you'll be like, huh. When you're put on the spot, you don't really know what your weaknesses are. But if you prepare beforehand, you can actually think about, you know, what your real weaknesses are and be able to speak to them really eloquently. Yeah, I would say those are the tips that I have. And also taking advantage of LinkedIn. When I was in high school, LinkedIn was not popular, but now it's becoming this hot new platform where, you know, people are posting like accomplishments and personal stories. And you can get on that boat as well. Like, you know, start a LinkedIn account and then start posting things about your accomplishments. You can write blog posts that people can read as well. And you can read what other people are writing as well. I think it's a great new resource. It's available to everybody.
Yeah, that was amazing. So many gold nuggets there too. And then also, I know that some people typically ask questions like, well, what if I don't know how to set up a LinkedIn? You know, if you have any questions about that, that would be a good thing to ask at the end when we get to the Q&A. And last but not least, Tamika, you can go ahead and share your experience.
Thank you. So yeah, my name is Tamika. I am currently director of HR at New York City Cyber Command, and I attended Temple University as my undergrad. One of the big things, and a lot of good content was already shared, so yeah, I hope you took notes, is transferable skills. So like Josh said, every experience is something to learn from. And so for me, the biggest piece of advice is to take every situation and figure out what you can learn from it. So for me, my first job ever was reffing children at soccer games. Maybe like $20 an hour, probably went out on Saturday, like $60. But from there, I learned how to deal with children. I learned how to deal with their parents. I learned how to deal with the coaches and disagreements, and all of that stuff, that foundational stuff. I find myself even coming to now as an adult, in my role now. You know, how do I deal with conflict? How do I manage folks that might be distracted with other things going on? So I think every situation you have is something that you can learn from. Another thing is paid activities are great. Volunteer activities are also great. So finding ways that you can volunteer, because those things are never in short supply. So if you find those transferable skills that you're looking for, so maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's I want to learn more about project management. While it's always best to get paid for it if you can, if you find it really hard to get into that space, if you find it hard to find those opportunities, there are always opportunities to volunteer. So I would always look for ways to volunteer. I did any volunteering that was available to me, whether it was doing orientations at the local animal shelter to Big Brother, Big Sister. So sorry, I also live in Flatbush where there's tons and tons of background noise. So the lovely thing about working or being at home. So those volunteer opportunities and being able to navigate those difficult situations are always beneficial. And to continue to build on your network, understanding that the people around you, especially your classmates, that's your future network. Those are your future colleagues. And being able to build those positive interactions now enable you to like, hey, remember that time we were in class? And I know we have these same goals and same ambitions. How can I help you? How can you help me? I remember when I first graduated college, my first job, I struggled. I struggled with having to sit in an office for 8 hours. I struggled with having to interact with colleagues that were older than me that didn't necessarily respect me. I struggled with that. What am I doing here? Like, what is my life? Why am I here? And I really tapped into the resource of my classmates that were going through that same thing in their first job. My friends and I, we used to schedule like happy hour, and we called the young professionals meeting. And really it was three of us sitting down and like crying about how hard our day at work was. But you know, we look back at that now, 10 years later, 11 years later, it's like, wow, like we really support each other through these difficult times. So understanding how to build your network, because it's an opportunity for a job, but it's also an opportunity to cope with the job, because you're going to get to a point, I think we all get to points where it gets difficult and you're going to constantly be looking for that, like, hey, how can I find someone to build me that support system? How can I find places to vent? How can I continue to grow outside of my job? So growing at your job, finding your job is super important, but there's also ways outside of that to find purpose. And I think that's just as important, because when you do go to that interview and they are trying to relate back to you as a person, people want to hire people. So understanding the job description is important, understanding what's needed technically for that position is important, but also bring your confident self to the table is very, very important. And sometimes you might have a lag in the beginning of your interview where you're doing that casual chit chat. How do you handle that? How do you navigate that? When they ask you, what do you do outside of work? That shouldn't be a really difficult question. You know, oh, I like to read. Oh, I'm really into hiking. Understanding those activities that you have make you that person. We can teach, and that's my whole thing is when I'm sitting with folks in interviews and I'm coaching a hiring manager, like, we can teach them a skill set. You know, we can go take them a class to learn SQL. We can take them a class to understand Microsoft Outlook. We can teach them skill sets. We can't teach them how to be a person. We can't teach them how to have those conversations confidently. So those types of things are really important. They're hiring you. They're hiring you to do a job, but they're really hiring you as this unique person that comes into the space and brings a unique point of view.
Well said. All right. There was so much goodness in that as well, and hitting different things like, you know, transferring skills, you know, similar to what Shivani said, you know, you decide you want to be a doctor, but there's still skills that you learn from internships. So that was all wonderful, and I concur. So we're going to go into the first question that we have from one of our attendees, which is, do you have any tips about what to wear to interview? And also, is it important to follow up after an interview with a thank you email, or is it better to send a handwritten note? And how this is going to work in the Q&A section for the panelists. If you want to answer this question, there's a raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Just go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll just call on whoever's hand I saw first. So who wants to tackle this first question? Do I see any hands? Oh, okay, Katie, go ahead.
I'm happy to take this one. You know, I'll address the second question first, and then I'll talk a little bit about what to wear. I think there is a thoughtfulness in a handwritten note. I work at a large corporation. It might take 3 weeks for me to get a handwritten note delivered to my desk. I would recommend following up with an email. I think, you know, while the gesture would certainly be appreciated in this day and age where things happen rapidly and hiring decisions are often made in the course of a week, following up is definitely important. I would highly recommend you follow up with every interviewer you ever speak to if it's a position that you're really interested in. If you meet with someone and you're still not interested in the role, I would still send them a thank you email to acknowledge, you know, that they took half an hour to meet with you, because you never know, sort of to Tamika's point, you never know when you might find yourself in a position where they hold a job you do want. So I think there's a thoughtfulness to sending a handwritten note, but I think in this day and age, sending an email is perfectly appropriate, but I would always recommend following up. With regard to what to wear to an interview, I would say that it is going to be very dependent upon what job you are looking for this day and age. For, you know, my role at Morgan Stanley, I work in investment banking. You would be wearing, you know, business professional, most likely business casual, potentially. If you have met with someone over Zoom and they're wearing business casual attire, you might be able to get away with business casual. I know that different industries are way more relaxed and allow for, you know, maybe business casual or maybe even jeans and a sweater. So I would say when in doubt, overdress, not underdress. But, you know, also feel free to always reach out to, if you were, you know, typically when you're coming in person for an interview, you've already been screened via phone or potentially nowadays via Zoom. And in my experience, you know, I would not be offended if someone shot me an email just to say, hey, confirming, you know, should I wear a suit, you know, to the interview, or would that be overkill? If you just want to confirm what would be the most comfortable for everyone involved, feel free to reach out and ask as well. There would be no shame in doing something like that. But I would say to err on the side of caution if you don't feel comfortable reaching out, or if you're going in person for a first interview, err on the side of overdressing versus underdressing.
Great. That's a lot of good information there. And then Josh, you want to give a input on that?
the only thing I was going to add, I'm not sure it's exactly related to the question, but it just you know, Katie said made me think that, you know, it's perfectly okay to reach out to recruiters, HR, whoever, and ask questions. You know, they're not there as, you know, some scary figure behind a curtain to try and trick you or mess with you or anything like that. So don't ever be afraid to, you know, to ask questions, whether it be about attire for the interview or anything else. Those are all perfectly normal questions. So don't be afraid to ask.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. And then with that, we're going to move on to the next question. Oh, Shivani, you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in
Okay,
really
yeah.
quickly. Just maybe not attire, but just like when you're carrying like your folder or whatever, make sure you have 2 copies of your resumes, because I've been in positions where the interviewer won't have theirs, and then, you know, you want to be in a position where you can hand them a copy and have a copy for yourself, rather than just handing over yours and then not having anything for yourself to read from. So I think just having 2 copies is just would be perfect.
Thank you. Nice tidbit there. And then so the next, we're going to move on to the next question, which is why are okay, I understand. What are some tips you learned on the job that you did not anticipate before you started that job? So I guess that can apply to internship as well. Who wants to take a shot at this one? Well, I'll give you a second to think about it. All right, go ahead.
So, you know, I would say the most valuable job that I've ever had that I did not think was valuable, I'll say I didn't think the job was, I thought it was just a thing I was doing for money, is working in a restaurant. I think that if you ever have the chance to work in a restaurant as a part-time role, go for it, because that will humble you as a person when you go out in the world. I learned really how to deal with conflict in a way that I never thought I would have. And it caused me to take on a management role within the restaurant because I wanted to be able to, I'm an HR person, so my whole theory is helping people at work. But I just didn't realize how difficult it was for people to do that type of work and just be on their feet the entire time. So for me, that was a job that I took that I just did for money, you know, some extras funds in college, that I really learned how to handle people. And just like, you know, angry people is one thing, hungry people is a whole nother ballgame. And so being able to navigate those types of conversations and calm people down, again, as I sit in my office, sometimes I'm like, remember when someone really tried to come at you for some chicken nuggets and now you learned how to just calm them down? Okay. You have this hiring manager, we can do this. We can handle anything. So yeah, a little thing I learned while just thinking that I was just taking a job for some extra money.
Yeah, definitely. And if anybody else, I have something to add on to that if no one else does. I think it's also adding, I guess, kind of piggybacking off of what Shivani said, and Tamika, which is like getting the internship also, you know, reminds you of what, sorry, I lost my train of thought. It helps you figure out what you don't want to do. And so that's one thing, if in regards to like, what's one tip you learned on the job? It's like what you don't want to do, what positions you don't want to be in. And so I think that's really good. And it's also important to see what type of environment you like. So, maybe there's, you look for company environments, and you're like, wow, I didn't think that would be important to me. And so that's something to consider, but that's something that you're not going to know without the experience of it. So just trying new things and trying different internships, I think, the sooner, like I think Katie said, the sooner you start applying, and trying different things out and trying different internships, I think that's a tip that you would learn just with experience. And then, do you both wanted to tackle that, Shivani and Josh? Okay, I'm like, I saw hands go up. Shivani can go ahead. I think you were first in line, I think.
Sure. I think the biggest thing I learned is just because you land one type of role does not mean you don't have access to anybody else at the organization. People are more than willing to grab coffee with you and talk about their work. So if you are interested in a different department or a different division and you're curious about what type of work they do, like go for it. Send them an email, ask them to grab coffee, ask your questions. People are really happy to do that. And I think that's how I've really learned about what I like to do and what I don't like to do and what I'm interested in and what I want to learn more about. You don't have to stay in your bubble. Like I worked at my first job, I worked in finance, but I didn't have to stay in my bubble. I, reached out to marketing, I reached out to communications, and it was just really insightful to learn about what they do and things that I never would have learned about if I didn't, reach out and ask people.
Great, thank you. And then Josh?
Yeah, I think even before I get to what I was going to say, I think what Shivani brought up is an excellent point. And just a quick personal story, I started my career at PwC, which is an accounting firm. And, quite frankly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it's a massive, massive organization with a million different groups. And I started off in one group, and just because I had a conversation with another partner at a company function, I learned about another group, and I said, hey, I would love to learn about that. And then I wound up doing that. And that kind of led me down a whole different career path and kind of led me to where I am now. And, so you kind of just don't know what you don't know. So the more people you can talk to and just learn about different areas of, one organization or multiple organizations, just any conversation, there's always something to take from it, in my opinion. But what I was going to say is that, I'm sure a lot of you on the call right now are very smart, very driven, probably extremely good students. And you probably have done very well in school, and I'm sure you'll all do very well in your careers. And I think one thing that's important, especially for, younger people who are very driven and motivated, is to understand and appreciate the fact that they're not going to know everything when they get there day one, whether that be for an internship or a full-time job. You could be a straight A student, and, I guess just using my career path as an example, you could have aced, I'm not saying I did, but you could have aced, every single accounting, finance, marketing class, whatever. But, when you get to the job on day one, pretty much everybody who's there knows a lot more about that job and that field than you do. So, don't be discouraged. I think, now being in a little bit more of a senior role, it's, to me, the most impressive thing about people is just their willingness to learn and get better and learn from mistakes and be proactive and reach out and see how they can be helpful and just kind of continue to advance in their role. And I think, that to me is way, way more valuable than understanding, any aspect of a job from a technical standpoint. And, I think all of us have kind of echoed that in some way over the course of this webinar, and just that, who you are as a person, and, kind of the willingness to be there, put your best foot forward, and be a contributing member, I think it goes much further than anything else.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Thank you so much, Josh. So we have another question from one of our attendees. And this is from Carmen, taking a step back from careers for a moment, can you talk about when high school students should be applying to college and how early they should start thinking about it? Anyone? Oh, Josh. Well, I was like, wait, is your hand still up or did you raise it?
It's still up.
Okay.
If no one else wanted to answer, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
I think it's as early as you want. I think it's one of those things where you could start looking at colleges and thinking about colleges sophomore year of high school. I'd say there's probably a point where it's probably, I don't want to say too late, but you fall behind the curve a little bit, if you're not even thinking about it until, end of junior, beginning of senior year. But sophomore year is surely not too early. I think you should certainly be doing it by the beginning of your junior year. And just like with anything, it's important to talk to people, to visit places, to learn about places, especially because knowing what you don't like is just as important as knowing what you might like.
And Katie, do you want to tackle that one too?
Sure. I totally agree with Josh. I was going to say sort of the same thing. I don't think there's ever a time that's too early to start. At the very least, thinking about, things have changed since I, and probably most others on this panel, apply to college. I know that ACTs and SATs are constantly changing, but that should, PSATs are something that you'll take your sophomore year, at least when I was in school. I don't know if they still do that. So take that with a grain of salt. But really, as you navigate through sort of that testing process, sort of thinking about what type of school you might be interested in, what field of study you might be interested in. Shivani said she wanted to be a doctor. Do you want to go to a school that's got a really great pre-med program? Are you interested in business? Maybe you want to go to a university that has a business school. Are you interested in acting or theater? You might want to find something that has a specialty niche area in those instances. Doing research on what programs exist at different schools or what schools have, broader generalizations can help you sort of narrow down what could seem like an extremely large list into something that's a little bit more palatable. To Josh's point, I totally agree that it's, important to see schools and visit schools. I'd also say, if, you're unable to or unwilling to, go and stay at school, visiting things that are local can be really helpful. Many students in many colleges have programs where you can have a virtual coffee chat with an existing student. You can get an idea of what it's like to be on campus. How many students are on campus? Do you want a large university? Do you want a small university? So sort of just thinking about those things and being proactive about those conversations can really start to help narrow down when you apply, because each school is going to have different application dates. I don't know if everyone's in the common application now. They weren't when I was in school or when I was applying to college. I don't even want to tell you how long ago. So, just sort of thinking about it can help narrow down when to apply. Also, if you have your heart set on a university, maybe you choose to do early admission. Maybe you do choose to do early decision or something. Or maybe you are interested in a couple and you're not willing to commit to something in the fall, and you might wait to apply until the spring. But I think Josh is exactly right. It's never too early to at least start doing your research. And that, again, along with your scores and what your interests might be, or what you think your interests might be, can help sort of define when you start the application process.
Exactly. And then Tamika, you want to tackle this one and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, to Katie's point, a lot of these schools, and I also don't know if that's still the case, but a lot of these schools do have summer programs that you can go for a weekend, or you can go with your parents for the day, I totally recommend seeing the campus, seeing what the environment's like, especially if you're committing the money and the time to get your degree. The sooner the better is definitely recommended. But if you can go on campus and you can see it and you can take your time, a lot of these schools again have these programs where maybe you go for like 3 or 4 weeks and you actually live there and you take a class. And I know for me, I wanted to go to University of Maryland so bad, and I took a weekend there, and we went to see a class, and I realized I had to take a bus to get to the class. That was my first and last time visiting the University of Maryland, because it was just too big for me. But I wouldn't have known that unless I went and I stayed the weekend. So just something to think about when you are thinking about location and visiting is really important if you have the opportunity.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. As a high school student, I don't know a lot of people besides my family and my classmates. How do I begin to network to find an internship? This is a good question, because there's such an abundance amount of options out there to look. And so where would you recommend I start? Who wants to take this one? All right, Tamika, I think you raised your hand first.
Sorry. Google is number one. If you can, search the Google search, and it can be as simple as internships and then your interests. Again, taking that time to understand what you're interested in really sets the standard, because you can start, you might not really be interested in this thing that you thought you're interested in. But that's a good way to get yourself exposed and in that environment, in that network. So being able to Google things that are within your location that are related to things that you're interested in is really important. And again, I'm a big fan of volunteering. So if your high school has a club that exposes you to this thing that you might want to get an internship in, look into that club, talk to that teacher. Your teachers also have a plethora of experiences and backgrounds. So you never know who someone else knows. So again, exploring those interests, but also being able to communicate what your interests are, and then putting yourself in those environments. So your teachers, your classmates, those are networks. Those people know people that you're going to want to know. So and your family too, your family knows people. If you have adults around you that are working, they are exposed to other folks that could be that opportunity that you're looking for. So understanding your interest, being able to communicate that, and then just going in these spaces and talking about what you're interested in, because again, you just never know.
100%. And I second that, because one of my first jobs I got out of college actually came from my teacher. So don't underestimate, your teachers are also your network, just not your family and your classmates. Josh?
Yeah, I think everything Tamika said is 100% right. And I certainly can't speak for everyone, but personally, when I see someone that shows initiative, I think personally that makes me want to help them as much as possible. And so I think showing initiative really in any way, shape, or form will make other people willing to help you. And I think especially when you're young, you kind of have this idea that getting a job, getting an internship, all these things are, there's some, secret society or some secret way to go about doing stuff. But really at the end of the day, it's just people connecting with people. And, especially with something as simple as Google, it's so easy to find people. It's so easy to find companies, businesses, what have you, and just reaching out to people. And that doesn't by any means, I'm not telling you that everybody is going to respond or that everybody is going to help you, but the more you kind of throw yourself out there, certainly some of those will come to fruition. And there are plenty of, kind of tools at your disposal just to find people and opportunities and just kind of throw yourself out there.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. We'll have Shivani on next, but I do want to also intervene and say really quick that CSF is also your network, and everyone on this panel. So your network has expanded from not just your family, not just your classmates, not just your teachers, but everyone here at CSF. Like that's why we are on this webinar, because we want to be a resource to you as well. So think of us, if you're looking for it, we've had several alumni in the past intern with CSF, including myself. So there you go. Shivani, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I actually had written CSF in big capital letters on my notes page here. Like, this is such a massive resource right here that you have. And then other things I had written down, just speaking about your high school, your guidance counselor is a huge resource. That's literally the reason, why she's there. It's to help you navigate through any life challenges, networking, college applications. So definitely like rely on your guidance counselor for any types of networking that you might want to do. Also, any college fairs that your high school may put on, that's a great resource too. When I was actually applying to college, I volunteered for like a college fair that my high school was putting on, just because I wanted to network with this director from NYU, which is where I ended up going, in order to get into their honors program. And I was able to like network with him and connect with him after the college fair, and then I got into the honors program. So it's just a great way to like expose yourself to different types of people just by volunteering at events that your high school may be putting on. And then also volunteer positions are a great way. My second job in high school was I volunteered at the Queens Museum of Art, and I was able to talk with somebody who was like doing like a arts management project or something. And just by talking to her, I was able to get a job for the summer on working on doing community outreach and things like that. So just your volunteering position would be a great resource as well. And then lastly, free conferences. There are a bunch of youth conferences, especially in New York City. I think NYU like puts on like free conferences for people as well. So you can definitely like go on Google, like look up these free conferences, register, and they often give out email addresses too, so you can follow up with them as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Shivani. So we have another question, and this I think is directly for you, Shivani. It says, Shivani mentioned LinkedIn. How do you recommend using it to find a job or an internship? And I know they didn't preface this in the question, but I want to say that sometimes jobs and interning on LinkedIn can be so like there's so many options, so maybe also chime in on how to navigate whatever options are on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so on the LinkedIn jobs page, you can actually set up 2 to 3 filters based on what you're looking for. So you can look up like filter by location, by the type of internship, as well as the industry. And you can set it up so that alerts get sent to your inbox every week with like the top 30 searches. I think that's what they call it. And they'll send you like jobs that or internships that fit those requirements that you set on your filter. On a weekly basis, and you can go through them at the end of each week and apply for the ones that you like and you don't like. And then also just another thing about LinkedIn, on their jobs page, they offer a bunch of free resources just to how to write your resume, interview tips, take advantage of those videos that they have as well. They're great. And then another thing about LinkedIn, people are really receptive to like connecting with people who you might not know, like if it's through a friend of a friend. If you write in the little introduction, like, why you're reaching out to them, what you're looking to get out of the relationship, why you're, just introducing yourself, humanizing yourself a little bit, they're really receptive to connecting with you. And then, you can start a direct message relationship with them that way as well. And then the last thing I would have to say about LinkedIn is how you format your profile also is really important, like having a professional picture on your page, having like your little description where you can write a description about your biography, like making that really customized, reflective of who you are. LinkedIn offers like a generic message that you can put on there, but if you Google like templates, you can find ways to tailor it to yourself as well. And then under, your high school or whatever job experiences you might be listing there, make sure you fill out like bullets. Like, so for each job posting, put like 3 bullets as to what you have done in your position, what your goals are, what you're pursuing. Make it really tailored to yourself. And that way you can stand out when you're networking with people on the platform.
Yeah, all great advice. On that note, since LinkedIn is technically a social media, for all of our attendees who are not following us, wait, wrong side. These are our social media handles. We have CSF, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, but we're also on LinkedIn. So are a lot of our young leaders boards, and so are a lot of our other alumni who are already working professionals in the industry. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Nicole Serrato, if you want to connect with me. I work for CSF, editing videos and managing their social medias, also communications development assistant, but I'm also a filmmaker in LA. So if if that's something that you're wanting to get into, you can reach out to me regarding that. Or again, you can, add any of our panelists on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be happy to connect with you too. And then with that being said, Katie, I'll let you answer that, and then we're going to go into the last question for tonight.
Sure. I just wanted to briefly add a few other things. I totally agree with everything Shivani said. And I also agree with regard to all the customizations. Like with your resume, making sure it's polished, make sure the grammar is correct, make sure that you're not using any profanity, that there are, your punctuation's correct. Like, again, you want it to come off very professionally. You don't want anyone to look at this and think, oh gosh, so be thoughtful about what you put out there. The second piece of advice I would say is LinkedIn is a great tool. You can reach out directly to a number of people. If you go that route, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with going that route, I would encourage many of you, to utilize that tool. Be thoughtful about what you say in your message. LinkedIn will provide you with an automatic prompt. Don't use the automatic prompt. Tell them why you're reaching out to them specifically. What about the person that you're trying to connect with, or the job that they have, is meaningful to you, and why do you want to meet with them? I think, LinkedIn's message is very generic and very basic, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I can promise you, you're way more likely to be overlooked if you use that generic message versus something that's customized and tailored to the recipient's, career path. And then the final piece of advice I have on LinkedIn, and this might be a little bit more applicable for those of you that are in college about to graduate, or maybe new graduates of college. I don't know how much this applies to those of you in high school, but you will encounter a number of recruiters on LinkedIn. They are free. You do not pay them. The employer pays them. Take advantage of them. They are specific to different industries. Some of them are generalists. Some of them focus on, specific roles. And it's a great way to potentially get your foot in the door at a company that you might not otherwise have the capabilities to get into on your own, or where you don't have connections. So, if someone reaches out to you on LinkedIn and they're a recruiter for, a business that you're interested in, set up a call with them. It doesn't hurt. You're not obligated to work with them. I wouldn't, if you meet with them and you're not interested and don't connect with them, I wouldn't recommend just ghosting them. But it's nice to at least have a conversation with them, share your resume with them, see what companies that they work with frequently, and just keep in mind that you don't owe them anything, and they get paid by the company if you get hired. So you are not financially on the hook for the work that they do. So it's just, that's one other tool on LinkedIn. People reach out regularly, and it's a great way to potentially diversify your network, or meet with people at other companies that you might not otherwise have, either known about or thought about or knew had job openings.
Yeah, that is all great tips for how to use LinkedIn and how to just kind of maximize it. So with that being said, we have 5 minutes left. Oh my God, the time went so fast. And so we're gonna answer this last questions, and then probably keep your answers short so we can wrap up on time. And then we're gonna take a picture before we go. So okay, here is coming from one of our attendees, which is, what do you think about interning and working remotely? And how can you get to know your coworkers, and what's expected when you only contact them through Zoom and email? This is a good one, because this is in the, Katie.
I will say only one thing on this subject. Pick up the phone and call people. Do not hide behind email. Do not hide behind Skype chat. You will not get to know anyone if you do not pick up the phone. It can be awkward. We live in a day and age in which a lot of people communicate, quickly over iMessaging and Skype and things like that. But the best way to really get to know someone is by picking up the phone and having a conversation. It's having that little bit of small talk that Tamika was talking about earlier. It's also a really great way to make sure that your tone does not get misconstrued, which can often happen over Skype and over Zoom. So my biggest piece of advice is, Zoom is fantastic, but in a large group setting, not everyone may get to speak on a Zoom. We're not all as democratic as this as this wonderful CSF Zoom has been. So my biggest piece of advice would be to pick up the phone and call people individually and really take the time to get to know them, even if you don't know them very well and you think it might be awkward. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
Great. And Tamika?
Yeah, what Katie said, definitely that intimate speaking is so important because that people know your voice, they know your intentions when you're using your words. If you're working remotely or interning remotely, I think the most important thing is to understand what the expectations are so that you are communicative, so that your boss doesn't think like, oh, they're just taking a nap and they're not responding to me. Make sure you understand what communication looks like for your team and make sure that you're responsive and that you know what you're responsible for. If you can get that from your supervisor as soon as possible, that can alleviate you from so many misunderstandings or miscommunications. But understanding what the expectation is super important so that, if is it that I need to answer your phone call within a 5 minute? Do I have an hour to work on this project? Make sure that understanding of time is communicated between you and whoever you're reporting to.
And then Josh?
Yeah,
Thank you,
I apologize. I just kind of wanted to give some general advice, but I think this is applicable to kind of everything that we've been saying. And it just kind of really hits on a few key points that I think Tamika, Katie, Shivani, myself, we've all kind of hit on. At the end of the day, everything that you do, whether it be internships, whether it be networking, whether it be a job, this is all about people, and every connection you make opens up more doors to more connections and things that you never knew about. And no one's going to do any of this for you. No one's going to, give you a job, or no one's going to give you an opportunity if you don't go ahead and try to do it yourself. And so it's really important to take initiative and recognize that this is all, I don't want to say easily attainable, but it can all be done. You just kind of have to do it. And just kind of show who you are as a person, because that's who somebody's hiring. That's who somebody wants to have for an internship. That's who somebody wants to connect with. And then the last piece of advice is, no matter what you're doing as it relates to any of the topics we've discussed, is do your homework. Come to every situation prepared, know why you're there, and be able to communicate that. And people will really respond well to that. And actually, I think it will benefit you more in every interaction, because the conversation will be had on a much deeper level than something you might have been able to just look up on your own. So do your homework, and all these interactions will be much more fruitful.
Thank you so much to our panelists, again, to Josh, to Katie, to Shivani, to Tamika. We really appreciate your time, the time that you set aside to volunteer. This is so helpful to all of our alumni. And we all have a good night, and we'll see you soon. Good night, everyone.